What happens when an undercover CEO overhears his own workers mocking management, only to reveal a truth they never expected? David Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Construction Group, adjusted his hard hat and wiped the sweat from his brow. Dressed in dusty overalls and steel-toed boots, he blended in with the crew working on one of his company's newest sites. For weeks, David had heard troubling reports. Low morale, missed deadlines, and unhappy workers. Rumors swirled that employees were frustrated with how upper management handled resources and workloads. Instead of relying on second-hand information, David decided to see it for himself. Undercover. From the moment David arrived on site, he sensed the tension. Workers moved sluggishly, barely speaking to one another. Equipment lay scattered, and half-finished tasks were left abandoned. It was nothing like the productive, high-energy teams he'd prided his company on building. "Hey, new guy!" someone barked. Evan, a broad-shouldered labourer, strolled over, a cocky grin spreading across his face. "Hope you know what you're doing. Management's been cutting corners so bad, this place might fall over before we finish." David forced a grin. "Yeah, well, guess I'll find out soon enough." Evan chuckled darkly. "Yeah, good luck." By midday, David was hauling plywood sheets across the site when he overheard two workers chatting near the scaffolding. "Man, this job's a joke," Tyler, one of the younger crew members, grumbled. "Management's clueless. They keep demanding we finish faster, but they never send enough materials on time." "Yeah," Evan snorted. "They sit in their fancy offices while we bust our backs out here. Typical corporate suits, no idea what it's really like on the ground." "If they spent one day on this site," Tyler muttered, "they'd see how bad things really are." David clenched his jaw. This is what they think of management. Of me. He wanted to defend himself, tell them about the budget constraints, supply, chain delays, and the sleepless nights he'd spent trying to fix things. But he held back. He needed to understand their frustration, not silence it. Later that afternoon, David found himself tasked with hauling concrete mix to a back corner of the site. He pushed the heavy wheelbarrow, muscles burning, until he reached the designated area, only to find Evan and Tyler lounging against a stack of bricks. "Must be nice," David muttered under his breath, setting the wheelbarrow down. "What's that?" Evan sneered. "I said, must be nice, taking it easy while the rest of us keep working." Evan's grin faded. "Oh, so the new guy thinks he knows everything, huh?" He stood, stepping closer. "Look around you. Half this site's a mess because management's been botching orders and pushing deadlines." "Maybe if you spent less time standing around," David shot back, "we'd actually make progress." "Progress?" Evan scoffed. "Yeah? Maybe if management actually gave a damn about us, we wouldn't be falling behind. You know how many hours we put in, and for what? Cheap materials, no overtime pay, and a boss who probably hasn't touched a hammer in his life." Tyler nodded in agreement. "I don't blame the crew. I blame the suits." David clenched his fists, but swallowed his pride. They weren't wrong. He knew things had gotten worse. He just didn't realize how badly his workers felt abandoned. The day dragged on. David quietly observed the crew. They weren't lazy. They were exhausted. Tasks that once required 5 workers were now handled by 2. Safety gear was worn out. Equipment broke down more often than it should. And still, they pushed on. He watched Maya, a lean, determined worker, skip her lunch break to finish leveling a gravel bed. He saw Tyler staying late to clean up loose tools and materials. And even Evan, who'd been so vocal earlier, helped a younger crew member figure out a tricky measurement without complaint. They weren't the problem. They were trying to fix it. As David prepared to leave for the day, he overheard Carl, the site manager, berating Maya. "I don't care how tired you are," Carl barked. "We're behind schedule. If you can't handle the workload, I'll find someone who can." "But Carl," Maya protested, "I've been here since 6 this morning. I haven't had a break. I said get back to work." Before David could stop himself, he stepped forward. "That's enough." Carl spun around. "Oh yeah, And who are you supposed to be? I'm David, he said calmly. And we're going to have a long conversation, soon. Carl scoffed, but something in David's tone silenced him. Turning to Maya, David handed her a bottle of water. Go sit down, he said quietly. You've done more than enough today. That evening, David sat in his truck, replaying the day's events in his mind. His workers weren't lazy. They were tired, frustrated, and unheard. And their anger? It wasn't about pride. It was about survival. I let this happen, David muttered. But I'm going to fix it. The morning after his undercover visit, David Reynolds returned to the construction site, but this time not in disguise. Wearing his tailored shirt and signature watch, he stepped out of his truck with purpose. Workers glanced up in surprise, whispering to one another, "That's the CEO. What's he doing here?" David ignored the stares. He had one target in mind, Carl, the site manager. "We need to talk," David said firmly as he stepped into Carl's office. "Oh, Mr. Reynolds," Carl stammered. "Didn't expect you here." "I should have been here sooner," David said coldly. "I heard what you said to Maya yesterday, and I've seen how you treat this crew." Carl's face darkened. "With all due respect, sir, you don't understand what it's like to run this place. I'm just keeping things moving." "No," David said, his voice sharp. "You've been running this crew into the ground, threatening people, ignoring safety, forcing overtime without breaks. That's not leadership. That's abuse." Carl scowled. "I don't have time to coddle slackers." "They're not slackers," David shot back. "They're holding this project together, despite your failures." He paused, voice firm. "You're done here. Pack your things." Carl's face paled. "But, sir," I said, "you're done." David turned and walked out, leaving no room for argument. Outside, the workers gathered, unsure what had just happened. David stood in front of them, clearing his throat. "I know some of you aren't happy with management," he began. "And honestly, I don't blame you. I've seen what you're dealing with, and I've seen how hard you've been working to fix problems that shouldn't be yours to fix," the crowd murmured. Even Evan and Tyler, the men who'd trashed management just the day before, watched with curiosity. "Carl's gone," David announced. "And things are going to change, starting now." Over the next few days, David stayed on site to rebuild trust. He worked side by side with the crew, hauling lumber, mixing concrete, and even joining Maya in leveling gravel. "Didn't think CEOs knew how to swing a hammer," Maya teased. "I've learned a few things," David grinned. "But I've still got a lot to learn from you guys." Together, they identified key issues. Equipment was outdated and breaking down. Materials often arrived late or incomplete. The crew was stretched thin with little communication from leadership. "We're fixing all of it," David promised. "But it's going to take time." Later that week, David approached Evan and Tyler during their break. "I heard what you guys said about management," he began. "Yeah?" Evan grunted. "You gonna fire us too?" "No," David said firmly. "Because you weren't wrong. Management has been cutting corners, and I take responsibility for that." Evan frowned, uncertain how to respond. "So, what now?" "Now," David said, "I need your help to fix it." David appointed Maya as crew lead, trusting her to manage day-to-day tasks. He invited Evan and Tyler to join a workers' advisory group, ensuring employees had a direct voice in decision-making. "I want to know what's working and what's not," David explained. "If something's wrong, I expect you to tell me." "You got it," Evan said with a nod. "Just don't disappear like the last guy." "I won't," David promised. "I'm in this for the long haul." By the end of the week, the site looked different, cleaner, more organized, and buzzing with energy. Workers laughed between tasks, and Maya confidently led her team. "You really turned this place around," Maya said, standing beside David as they watched the crew work. "We did," David corrected. "This isn't just about fixing a project, it's about building something better for everyone." Maya smiled. "I think we're finally getting there." David nodded. "Yeah, I think so too. David Reynolds stood at the edge of the construction site, watching his crew settle into a new rhythm. The tension that once plagued the site had started to ease. Workers were laughing between tasks, communication had improved, and Maya, now, the newly appointed crew lead, was handling her role with confidence. But David knew things weren't fully fixed yet. There's still more to do, he muttered to himself. As Maya began assigning tasks one morning, Evan scowled. Why do I have to handle the drainage trench? I've been here longer than half the crew. Because you know how to do it right, Maya replied evenly. And I trust you to teach the newer guys. Yeah, Evan muttered under his breath. I'm sure that's the reason. Later that afternoon, Maya found Evan ignoring her request to check the concrete curing area. Instead, he stood chatting with Tyler while unfinished work piled up. Evan, Maya said firmly, I asked you to handle the curing checks. What's going on? Relax, Evan shrugged. It's under control. Not when cracks start forming in the concrete, Maya shot back. Please, just do your part. Evan rolled his eyes, but grabbed his clipboard and headed toward the concrete station. That evening, David noticed Maya pacing the site. Rough day, he asked. It's Evan, Maya sighed. He keeps second-guessing everything I ask him to do. He'll come around, David reassured her. But respect isn't instant. You're building something new, and trust takes time. I get that, Maya said. But what if he doesn't start listening, and something goes wrong? Then, David said firmly, you lead by example. And when? That's not enough. You call him out. Maya took a deep breath. All right, I'll try. 2 days later, dark clouds gathered over the construction site. A heavy storm rolled in, bringing high winds and torrential rain. The crew scrambled to cover equipment and secure loose materials, but the site's drainage system was quickly overwhelmed. Water pooled around the concrete curing station, the same one Maya had asked Evan to double-check. Evan, Maya shouted, over the rain. Did you finish checking the drainage like I asked? I thought Tyler covered it, Evan yelled back, his voice panicked. No, Maya's eyes widened. I asked you. The growing puddle seeped toward the foundation. If the water reached the still curing concrete, the entire slab could be compromised, threatening weeks of work. We need sandbags, Maya called out. Everyone, grab what you can. David jumped in alongside the crew, hauling sandbags to block the water's path. Maya moved quickly, organizing the team to create makeshift drainage channels. Despite the chaos, she kept her cool, directing Evan, Tyler, and others with clear instructions. Here, Evan shouted, dumping his last sandbag in place. That should stop it! Moments later, the water redirected away from the concrete slab. The crew paused, soaked and exhausted, but smiling in relief. Nice work, David told Maya. You kept your head when it counted. Couldn't have done it without the crew, Maya replied, glancing at Evan. Yeah, Evan admitted with a sheepish grin. I should have listened to you earlier. I won't let that happen again. A week later, as the crew gathered for their morning meeting, David addressed the team. I know things haven't always been easy here, he began, but I've seen firsthand how hard you've all worked to turn this site around. He turned to Maya. And that's because of you. The crew clapped, and Maya's face flushed with pride. I'm no expert, Maya said, but I know one thing. When we trust each other, this crew gets the job done, and that's how we're going to finish this project, together. I'll drink to that, Evan grinned, lifting his coffee cup. The crew laughed, tension finally giving way to camaraderie. Later that afternoon, David stood beside Maya, watching the crew finish their shift. You know, David said, when I first went undercover, I thought I was here to fix the crew. Turns out, I was here to listen. Maya smiled. Sometimes that's all people need. David clapped her on the shoulder. You're going to make a great leader. I learned from the best. Maya grinned. The morning after the storm, David Reynolds stood at the construction site entrance, reflecting on everything the crew had endured. The storm had pushed them to the brink, yet they'd rallied together, thanks largely to Maya's leadership. But David knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The project deadline loomed, and there was still plenty of work to be done. "All right, everyone, listen up." Maya's voice rang out over the noise of machinery. Workers gathered around, their respect for her more visible now. "I know we're behind schedule," Maya said, "but if we work together, we can finish strong. The key is efficiency. No wasted steps, no guesswork. I'll assign tasks based on what each of you does best." Evan smirked from the back. "Guess that means I'm digging trenches again." "Nope," Maya grinned. "I need you helping Tyler lead the framing crew. You've been here long enough to know how the beams fit, and I trust you to teach the newer guys." Evan's smile faded into something more serious, a hint of pride. "You got it, boss." Over the next week, Maya organized morning huddles, ensuring each crew member knew their role. David quietly observed her, impressed by her ability to lead without arrogance. She listened to feedback, solved problems on the fly, and never hesitated to get her hands dirty alongside the team. "She's something special," David murmured to himself. Still, the pressure mounted. The project deadline was just 5 days away, and finishing on time seemed impossible. Just as things seemed under control, another setback struck. A delivery of key materials was delayed. Without those supplies, the crew couldn't complete the exterior framework in time. "This might push us past the deadline," Maya admitted to David. "I don't know how we're supposed to keep up." David paused, then smiled. "We've got something better than materials. We've got people who care." That evening, David made calls to nearby suppliers and even reached out to some of his own contacts. Meanwhile, Maya rallied the crew to refocus on tasks they could complete, installing insulation, wiring, and plumbing, all while waiting for the missing supplies. 2 days later, thanks to a supplier David had personally convinced to expedite the order, the missing materials arrived. The crew cheered as the truck pulled in, and they wasted no time getting back to work. As the final pieces of the structure came together, the mood on site shifted. Workers no longer just followed orders. They anticipated each other's needs. Evan coached the newer crew members, while Tyler ensured every measurement was precise. Maya checked on each group, encouraging them and jumping in when needed. David couldn't stop smiling, not just because the work was getting done, but because something deeper had changed. The crew had become a team. On the morning of the project's deadline, David gathered the crew together. "I know this hasn't been easy," he began, "but I've watched you pull together when things felt impossible. I've seen you support each other, trust each other, and prove that this crew is stronger than it's ever been." He turned to Maya. "And that's because you believed in this team when no one else did." "We believed in each other," Maya said, quietly. "That's what made the difference." "Let's finish this," David said. With the entire team working in sync, they completed the project just in time. As the final piece of siding was secured and the site cleaned, the crew erupted in cheers. David shook Maya's hand. "You saved this project," he said, "and you saved this crew." "We saved each other," Maya replied with a smile. The following week, David gathered the crew for a meeting. This project was more than just building a structure, he began. It was about building trust. And that trust starts with leadership. Turning to Maya, he smiled. "That's why I'm promoting Maya to site manager, effective immediately." Maya's eyes widened. "Wait, me?" "You've earned it," David said. "You proved you can lead, not just with orders, but with heart." The crew cheered as Maya stepped forward. Even Evan grinned, giving her a proud nod. "Looks like you're the boss now," Evan joked. "Guess so," Maya laughed. "But don't get too comfortable. I'll be expecting you to help keep things running smoothly." A week later, as David prepared to leave the site, Maya found him by his truck. "So, Maya said. Where are you off to next? Another site, David smiled. But I think this place will be just fine without me. Because you know we've got this, Maya said confidently. Exactly, David replied. I knew you would. As David drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror, watching Maya guide her crew, calm and confident. She wasn't just a manager, she was a leader. And David knew this project's success wasn't just about bricks and mortar. It was about people. And people like Maya were the foundation of something stronger than any building. Trust. Like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.